November 1st, 1755, 9:40 a.m. At that moment, beneath the surface of the Atlantic Ocean, a tectonic fault between the African and Eurasian plates released energy that is now estimated to have measured 9.0 on the Richter scale. This was 10,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima, and after the earthquake, the sea receded, exposing the seabed and triggering a 20-meter-high tsunami. Before the disaster, in the mid-18th century, Lisbon was one of the wealthiest cities in Europe. It was not just a capital, it was the heart of a vast colonial empire that stretched from Brazil to Goa, from Angola to Macau. Gold, spices, sugar, and slaves passed through the port of Lisbon. The city lived off immense wealth, and this was evident in literally everything. The population was about 275,000 people. By the standards of the time, it was a huge metropolis. Buildings stood close together. The streets were narrow, and many houses were wooden or built on medieval foundations. There were no building codes, no understanding of seismic vulnerability. People simply built as best they could, wherever it was convenient. November 1st. It is All Saints' Day, one of the major Catholic holidays of the year. All of Lisbon's churches were packed. People had come to Mass in the morning. The nobility, merchants, artisans, servants. Candles burned everywhere on the altars, in the chapels, in private homes. The city was alive, bustling, and completely carefree. The disaster. The first tremor struck around 9:40 a.m. Eyewitnesses described it as a low rumble coming from beneath the ground, as if someone were moving huge stones deep below. Then, a jolt, as if something monstrous had exploded beneath the city. The earthquake lasted between 3 and 6 minutes. That is a very long time. Most earthquakes end in seconds. Here, it was minutes of unceasing movement. There was not just one tremor, but three separate seismic shocks with short pauses between them. Modern researchers believe that this is precisely what caused such extensive destruction. Buildings that withstood the first tremor collapsed after the second or third. The royal palace on the waterfront collapsed. The famous Ribeira, Lisbon's main square, was littered with debris. The Sé Cathedral, which had stood since the 12th century, was severely damaged. The Opera House, which had opened just 6 months earlier and was considered one of the most beautiful in Europe, was completely destroyed. The Casa de India, the House of India, the State Archive, where all trade records, maps, and documents of the colonial administration were kept, lies in ruins, and with it, a significant part of the historical memory of the Age of Discovery. The English merchant Thomas Chase, who survived, later wrote, "He stood in the street and saw the houses on both sides collapsing inward, as if someone had removed the support from within. Those who survived the tremors, and there were many of them, ran out into open spaces. It was the right instinct. People fled toward the Tagus River, toward the embankment, away from the collapsing buildings. And this is where the second act of the disaster begins. About 40 minutes after the first tremor, the water at the mouth of the Tagus began to behave strangely. It started to recede, moving far from the shore, exposing the riverbed, anchors, shipwrecks, silt. People standing on the embankment watched this with curiosity. Some even walked forward to look at the exposed seabed. The retreating water is a classic sign of an approaching tsunami. The wave came. The first was about 6 meters high. Behind it came a second, even larger one, then a third. The embankment, where thousands of people had gathered to escape the earthquake, was completely swept away. The tsunami waves from the Lisbon earthquake reached the British Isles, Ireland, the Caribbean, and even the coast of Brazil. In the Moroccan city of Agadir, the wave killed between 8 and 10,000 people, and this in a country on the other side of the ocean. The scale was global, but that was not all. While the waves were washing away the waterfront, fires were already breaking out in the city. Candles in churches and homes, on a holiday, fell onto wooden structures, tapestries, and furniture. Fires broke out in several places at once. Narrow streets, littered with debris, made any attempt at firefighting impossible. The fire burned for 5 days without stopping. A third of the city, which had not been destroyed by the earthquake, was consumed by the flames. Another part was swept away by the tsunami. By the end of November, only about 20% of Lisbon's buildings remained in usable condition. The death toll ranged from 30 to 60,000 people in Lisbon alone. Including the rest of Portugal and Morocco, the total reached up to 100,000. After the disaster King Jose I survived by a stroke of luck. That morning, he had left the palace earlier than usual for a walk in the countryside. When he returned and saw the ruins of his capital, he set up tents on the hills surrounding the city and lived in them for the rest of his life. The claustrophobia that developed after the earthquake plagued him for 23 years, until his death in 1777. But it was not the king who ruled the country. The country was ruled by his prime minister, Sebastião José de Carvalho e Melo, whom history remembers as the Marquis of Pombal. Pombal was one of the key figures of the era. When the courtiers panicked, when the priest called for repentance and said that this was God's punishment, Pombal uttered a phrase that became a historic aphorism: bury the dead and feed the living. He acted immediately and decisively. The military cordoned off the city to prevent looting. Looters were hanged on the spot. Field kitchens were set up. Medical aid was provided. Bodies were buried, including mass burials at sea, because there was no time. Pombal understood that decomposing bodies in the ruined city would lead to a plague epidemic that would kill more people than the earthquake itself. Reconstruction. The reconstruction of Lisbon became one of the first examples in history of state-urban planning in the modern sense of the word. Pombal invited architects and engineers. They were tasked with building a new city that could withstand the next earthquake, and they devised what is today called the Gaiola Pombalina, the Pombaline cage. It is a wooden frame inside a stone building that functions as a flexible skeleton. When shaken, the building sways, but does not collapse. This was a revolutionary engineering solution for the 18th century. New Lisbon, the lower city, Baixa, was built according to a single, regular plan. Straight streets, buildings of uniform height, standardized facades. It was one of the first examples in Europe of what we would today call zoning and an urban planning code. Pombal also did something that is rarely mentioned in popular accounts. He sent out a questionnaire about the earthquake throughout Portugal, to every parish, to every priest. How long did the tremors last? Where did the sound come from? How did the sea behave? Did the wells collapse? This was the first systematic attempt in history to collect scientific data on an earthquake immediately after it occurred. In effect, it marked the birth of modern seismology as a science. An intellectual turning point. The 1755 earthquake shook not only Portugal, it shook European thought. Voltaire wrote a poem about the Lisbon disaster as early as December of that same year. And then came Candide, one of the most important works of the Enlightenment, where the philosophy that everything is for the best in the best of all possible worlds is shattered precisely by the image of Lisbon in ruins. Immanuel Kant wrote 3 scholarly works on the earthquake. These were among his first published texts. Philosophers and theologians across Europe asked themselves, if God is omnipotent and benevolent, how could he have allowed this on All Saints' Day, when people are kneeling in church? This question had no simple answer, and that is precisely what made the Lisbon earthquake not just a natural disaster, but an intellectual turning point of the era. Conclusion. Lisbon was rebuilt. It took decades, but the city rose again. Pombal's lower city still stands today, with its straight streets and earthquake-resistant houses. It is a living monument to the fact that people are capable of thinking even in the midst of disaster. But it is important to remember this. The ground beneath Lisbon has not settled. The same fault, the Azores-Gibraltar fault, exists today. Seismologists know this. Portuguese builders know this. And that is precisely why the story of 1755 is not just a story about the past. It is a lesson the Earth taught us once, and one that, by all accounts, it has not forgotten.